Hi, I'm Bob Dixon. Welcome to the Eagle Insight Podcast, your go-to source for bold and actionable leadership insights. With more than 30 years as a military officer and a strategist, I know leadership is about real impact. In this series, I sit down with top industry leaders to uncover their challenges and their success secrets. Ready to elevate your leadership? Well, hit subscribe. And if you'd like to be a guest, visit 5eaglesleadership.com/interview. Let's dive in. And welcome back to the Eagle Insight Podcast, where our goal is to help leaders everywhere be their very best. And I am absolutely thrilled to have Joe Polanin today. He's an award-winning CEO, a combat veteran, and a best-selling author. And now he helps leaders through Alakai Leadership Group be their very best. And by the way, they also provide customized senior executive leadership consulting and fractional C-suite support. Joe, thank you for being here, man.
Bob, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. It is absolutely my honor and privilege to join you today. Thanks so much also for that kind intro.
Oh, no, it's easy to write intros for people with your track record, man. And I know you have done great things, and now you're helping other leaders do great things. And you've done that deliberately. And I think that's an important thing that leaders need to think about, is like, how deliberate are you about your leadership? And Joe, you have been very deliberate, and you had to be because you were helping other leaders. And I think there's a lot of leaders out there just kind of going through the motions, and they're not being deliberate about their leadership. But you're not like that, and you're not letting the people that you work with be like that. So let me ask, what do you think are like the best practices for leaders in leading successful organizations?
So Bob, thank you again for that. And you're absolutely right. I think there's a two-part harmony for that I'd love to expand upon. One part is the individual leadership qualities and how we make ourselves and our teammates better leaders, right? So there's an individual leadership component. And then, as you talked about, there's an organizational leadership component. So I'll start with the organizational first, and then I'll come back to the individual. My best practices in my experience has taught me that there must be unity of effort and harmony with three elements for an organization to be successful and for the leaders of that organization to propel it forward. Number one, they got to have a bold vision for the future. You know, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. So you have to have a bold vision for the future. People have to get excited about it. They have to get fired up about it. They have to love it. They have to be passionate about it. Number two, you have to have a strategy or a plan of action to make it happen. You got this fantastic idea. It's well communicated. People love it, but there's no action plan. Guess what? People aren't going to love it very long. And the action plan can't be a 500-page thesis. It's got to be clear. It's got to be simple. And it's got to say, here's what we're going to do. And here's how we're going to rally. And here's how we're going to implement. And then number three, you have to attract and inspire talented people to love that vision and love that plan and execute with excellence on it every day. A leader who fosters that will have a successful organization and a successful team. Now, how does that leader themselves become successful? You and I have talked about this before, and I'd love to just expand upon it for a little bit here. The individual leader, how do you get better? How do you make others better? And then you can lead the organization. I think there are three parts to that too. I think number one, you got to learn to lead yourself. You got to take responsibility for your actions. Right. You got to have a moral and ethical compass. You got to do what's right. Number two, you have a person, follower. I want to be a good teammate. I want to be the person who is helping others and learning from others. And you got to have humility. And then number three, you've got to earn the privilege to lead others. That's not an entitlement. It's not something that's given to us. So we learn to lead ourselves first, and we learn to become great followers and excellent teammates and care about other people. And then we earn the privilege to lead others and have the opportunity to bolster the organization. So that two-part harmony is what I would share for leading a successful organization.
There's a lot to unpack there. I love this. From a strategic standpoint, the idea of having a bold vision and then actually having a plan to go after that is so essential. And I think there's a lot of money being spent on strategic offsites and strategic planning that that really it's useful for about 10 minutes, and then it goes into this book called The Strategic Plan, and it goes up on a shelf. And then a year later, you want to invest in more strategic planning, and you go, oh, we had a plan. Where is it? Oh, it's still on that shelf. Okay, dust it off. Let's have another look. Uh, those are tough conversations for me as a coach, going into an organization and saying, look, we could spend all the time you want coming up with a plan, but if you don't have any action behind it, if there's no accountability to it, there's not going to be anything but a dusty folder or binder on there that we're going to dust off next year. So have a bold vision, have a freaking plan to actually execute it. And then I love the third part, which is inspire, acquire, attract, have that team. It comes back to Jim Collins, right? It's right people in the right seats, and that never gets old. And I'll say it 1,000 times a week. And I don't feel like I'm plagiarizing Jim. I think I am honoring him by saying that is such a key, and he did it so well to articulate the way he did. The second part about leading yourself and being a great follower. Now I'm gonna pick on that a little bit, because I work with a lot of entrepreneurs who happen to be at the top of their food chain. So these guys are the CEO and sometimes the owner or founders of their own companies. And they would probably chafe at this idea, Joe, that you want them to be a great follower. So what do you say to them?
Well, I say, look in the mirror. And what are the 50 mistakes you made yesterday? Have you learned from those? And you're going to make 50 new ones today, but have that spirit of quiet professionalism. Have that spirit of humility. Have that spirit that says, it doesn't matter who gets the credit. What matters is the team successful and is the organization successful? Now, if you're a solopreneur or you're an entrepreneur with a team of two, okay, there are going to be a lot of things that everybody's doing. I get that. Totally understand it. Totally respect it. But be genuine, be authentic, and be humble, and say every day, I'm not the smartest person in the room. There is always someone that knows more, that is better, stronger, faster, more effective, more efficient at different things than I am. So when I'm attracting and I'm bringing together those people that I talked about earlier, I want to actually attract people that are better than me. I want to attract people that are smarter than me, that have a range of disciplines. And then, as a dear friend and mentor of mine likes to say, once you have lions, don't keep them on a leash. Let them run. And there's a good chance you've spent a lot of time and effort to get the right people on the bus. Let them do their thing. And so being a good follower, I choose the word follower, but you could easily replace it with teammate. You could easily replace it with be a good person, be humble, be contrite, understand that you aren't the smartest person in the room. And the ethos that we lived by in our profession in the military, my background was EOD, explosive ordnance disposal. That's the bomb squad. And, we have an ethos of quiet professionalism. Do what's right because it's right the first time, every time. And don't worry about who gets the credit, and don't talk about it, and then get right back to work on the next task. Those are the people that are going to be successful. Those are the teams and the organizations and the companies that are going to thrive.
Yeah. Joe, I wonder if it's wrong that as soon as you talked about being part of the bomb squad, and then you said quiet professional, and I'm like, okay, we're being quiet because we're disarming a bomb right now, and shh. That's what went through my head, and I don't know why, but I love this idea that we have the idea of followership is incredibly important. I think as a leader, if you are a solopreneur, and we know go back to number one, lead yourself, but you also have to be a good follower of yourself. Right. And I think there's some introspection that has to happen to say, okay, I've got this great plan of, Monday night, I've got this great plan for what I'm going to do Tuesday. And in the morning, you got to get up and execute that plan. But if I'm a poor follower of my own wisdom, I'm a poor follower of my own plans, I'm going to get up and go, I know when I was clear headed last night and I thought this was a good idea, but this morning I don't really feel like doing it. Now I'm a poor follower of my own leadership. And Joe, I will tell you that happens to all of us at some time or another. It happens to me way too frequently that I've got every intention to get up and do my workout. And then in the morning I get up and I'm like, oh, wait, I would rather get something done. So that's part of the followership piece is can you be true to your yesterday self? And oh, by the way, can I be true to my tomorrow self?
I love that. I love that, and if I may, I'll just expand upon that and
Sure,
underscore
absolutely,
that
go.
a little bit. That discipline, that level of commitment, that's something that I was just coaching with a group of university students who are entrepreneurs, and we talked about why you love what you do. So whatever your company is, if it's a solopreneur, if it's 2,000 people, why do you love it? Why are you passionate about it?
Right.
And that intangible, that fire, that connection within our heart, that connection. Here's a word that a lot of people don't use in business: love. Why do you love what you do?
Right.
And when you have that connection, we're all human. We all have these things come up, and you wake up in the morning and you say, my goodness, I had a plan for today, but I don't want to do that. I'm tired, or whatever the case may be. I always find an inspiration by referring back to that love and referring back to what's in my DNA that says, you know what's right, do what you're supposed to do, follow through. And I refer to it in a little acronym that I like to say, DCA: decide, commit, act. So you've spent a lot of time thinking about what the right decisions are. When you decide, commit to that fully with 100% of your personal best effort, and then take decisive action and make it happen. And we're all human. We're going to make mistakes and we're going to fall short. But it's about what you said, the commitment to yourself from yesterday, following through to today. I absolutely couldn't agree more.
Yeah, so I love how you used the DCA piece, and it immediately brought me back to Boyd's OODA loop, and the whole idea of making a decision and then acting on that, and then there's always this piece at the back end of that is assess, right? How are we doing with, was that a good decision or not? Or am I oriented the correct way? Am I observing? Am I getting the right information to make best decisions? And decision making is a whole other topic that I think we could probably unpack, Joe. And we may want to do that on a separate podcast, because the whole art and science of making decisions is something that every leader needs to understand. And that if they are deliberate about decision making and not just shooting from the hip, their organizations are so much better off.
Yeah, avoiding the but first syndrome. I've decided to do this, but first I'm going to go do this, and then I get done with that. But first I'm going to go do this. I'll get back to that priority later on, right?
Yes.
I don't know who the author of this was, but when I was a young officer, we were taught the ABC rule, and the ABC rule was do the A things first, do the B things second, and don't spend a lot of time on the C things. The A things are those priorities, those decisions, those actions that are really, really important, and they require a lot of time, a lot of thought, and a lot of effort, long projects, right? The C pile are the things that you could probably knock out in 30 seconds, and they're really easy, but they may not be that important for the big picture, for the strategy, for getting things done, for that discipline of what you're supposed to do. And the B things are kind of in the middle. So spend most of your time on the A things, do the B things a little bit, and don't delegate the C things. And if you're a solopreneur, get to the C things when you get to them, but don't fall victim to the but first syndrome.
Yeah, I think that's awesome advice. And when in Gino Wickman's writings, he'll talk about the jar of rocks and pebbles and sand and water. And
Yeah,
if you put them in the wrong order, if you put the sand in and the pebbles in and the water in first, you're not going to have room for the rocks, which are
that's right.
big important things. But if you put them in first, you put those rocks in the jar first, and then you're gonna let the pebbles go around all of them. And even if it looks full, you still have room for sand and you still have room for the water. But that means prioritization, which is so we've talked about two major functions that leaders have to get in their kit bag, is to make great decisions
Hmm.
and to prioritize.
Absolutely. And if I may, an excursion back to what you talked about, that company or that organization who thinks that strategic planning is something that you do in an offsite. And then you come back
Right.
and you put the plan on the shelf and you go back to what you're supposed to do. No, what you're supposed to do is implement that plan with diligence, with vigilance, with discipline. That's what you're supposed to do. And the organizations who get it right will spend the time and the necessary resources thinking strategically, prioritizing well, and then committing to that priority or those set of priorities, and then executing with the big rocks, as you mentioned. I was having this conversation with a colleague yesterday, and I said the way that his team was explaining it, these are our most important priorities. I said, okay, I'm not an English teacher, but the last time I checked, most is a superlative. You can only have one most important thing. What is that most important thing? Then you can have other things that fall on down the line. They were like, oh yeah, that's right. So when you have that clarity and you understand that strategic planning is not something for some exercise, that's what you need to do. Most of the companies that I've worked with, most of the companies that I've studied, both academically and as a practitioner, public sector, private sector, publicly traded, private companies, privately held, for-profit, non-for-profit, there's a fundamental and prevalent and systemic disconnect that occurs that generally leads to a problem somewhere. And it can be traced back to what I mentioned earlier, that lack of unity, that lack of harmony between the vision, the plan, and the people. However, when the vision is aligned with the plan and people love it and they're inspired, they'll move mountains for you and you won't have to tell them what to do. And that's a beautiful thing. When you don't have that's when a problem ensues, and people don't know how and why, what they're supposed to do, how it fits into the puzzle. They don't understand the order and the sequencing of the big rocks and the small rocks and the sand and the water. And guess what? People who are uninspired, they're going to go somewhere else.
So Joe, I wrote the disconnect, and what you then described as a holy trinity for particularly for small, medium-sized businesses,
Yep.
which is the vision, the plan, and the people. And
Yep.
when you pull that apart a little bit, and I look at that and I go, you know what? Joe just said where we're going, how we're getting there. That's the plan, and it's probably including the why is either in the vision or in the plan, and then who's going to do this, and that's the people. So the Holy Trinity for our success model here hinges on having a great vision, having a great plan, having great people, so that we know where, why, how, and who.
Yep.
It's really that simple.
It is.
And it's amazing to me, Joe, how many people struggle with this as leaders, particularly as small, medium-sized businesses, is they think that they need to have a complicated strategy, that they need to go spend hours and hours and days off-site and figuring out all of these big-headed things. And it turns out if you got those three, the Holy Trinity, but Clausewitz is rolling over in his grave right now, but if you kept it that simple,
it has to be. It has to be that simple, because I'm not going to read something that's 50 pages, let alone something that's 500 pages. It has to be that simple. It's got to be clear. People have to get it. They have to read it and they have to go, oh, this is useful to me and I'm ready to use it. And those are two different things. That's not a play on words. That's not Yogi Berra. It's things like a strategy, like a plan. they have to be useful to people,
Right.
and people have to use them every day. And when you know it's working, when people are actually using that plan or using that system. Super quick case study story from a personal experience. I was advising a company, and I was having a conversation, very frank, very candid conversation with the CEO. And I laid out for the CEO a lot of the things we were just talking about: disconnect, the lessons learned, all those kinds of things, vision, planning, people. And this particular CEO said to me, wow, I need that. I need that in my company. I need it. I need you. I love that. I need it. The only problem is I don't have time for anything extra right now because I have to go make money.
Right.
I said, well, I said, I have failed you because I have failed to explain this. If you believe that what I just said to you is extra, then I have failed and you don't understand what I'm saying. You might make money tomorrow. You might make money next month. But if you don't have a vision, people aren't fired up about it, and you don't have a plan to make it happen, and the people that are already on your team aren't inspired, don't be surprised if you're not making money 6 months from now. And don't be surprised if you're not around a year from now, because smart people are going to go somewhere else. And he kind of looked at me like, oh, hey, what's that? And I said, no, I want you to be successful, but I'm telling you, this isn't an academic exercise for your offsite. This is real. And if you have it, you're on to something big.
Well, that's you've probably not had that conversation more than 150, 200 times with leaders, right? And I had a very similar conversation with a leader that I work with that we're trying to instill the right tools, get to the right people in the right seats, and the right processes that are simplified, documented, and followed by all. And the difficulty in leaders letting go of things to allow their organization to thrive is astounding to me. But when you have the right vision, the right plan, and the right people, you should be able to let go of things so that you can concentrate on the big picture stuff as a leader. And it's amazing to me how many folks struggle with that, because it's a pretty straightforward concept, but it's real.
It is.
And
Right.
the difficulty is real, and it's prevalent enough to acknowledge as coaches and as consultants that is rooted in fear.
Yeah, it can be. And I think it was Carnegie that famously taught us that action breeds confidence and inaction breeds fear. And so if you are a leader at any echelon and you haven't delegated before, guess what? So there's going to be a little bit of fear, probably. Maybe there's a lot of fear. I learned and practiced, and I always try to improve my delegation focus, because I believe in my heart that delegation is not abdication. Delegation is you take time getting to know people. You take time investing in them, making them better leaders. I always say a leader's first best calling is to develop new leaders that are better than the best we ever knew. So take a minute and imagine, who's the best leader you ever knew? Maybe it's multiple people, but there I go again with grammar. Best is a superlative. Who's the best leader you ever knew? Why? Why was that person the best for you? Now, imagine that and set that as the standard, and then say, I'm going to develop new leaders, the next generation of leaders, to be better than the best I ever knew. That's how we move forward together. And when it comes to delegation, the only way leaders are going to get better at delegation is to do it. And the only way new leaders are going to get better at learning how to do new things is to get authority delegated to them. So I always say delegation is an abdication. You spend time learning about people. You spend time understanding what's important. Then you train them and you educate them. What is that high standard? What is the expectation? What does excellence look like? And then once they understand it, you put the training wheels on the bike, you let them ride for a while, and then eventually you take the training wheels off and you delegate. And sometimes, here's how how you're getting it right when it starts to feel uncomfortable.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
uh-oh, have I delegated too much? Oh my gosh. the way you pass through that and you break through that feeling of uncomfortability is you delegate a little bit more. And it's a beautiful thing when it's humming, and it is, this is a rare thing, but when that's happening, it is a wonderful thing to behold and sit back, because those lions are going to run.
I love that, and I was in a small group discussion with Jim Mattis, General Jim Mattis, former was he the chairman? He was the former commandant
Yeah.
of the Marine Corps. He
Yeah.
was the former Secretary of
SecDef,
Defense. So
yeah.
somebody who knows a little bit something about leadership,
A little bit.
and has studied that in depth his entire adult life. And he talked about delegation in terms of, okay, he says if you're not uncomfortable, you haven't let go of enough. And I was a young captain when I heard him say that for the first time, and I was really blessed to have been in the room, because it helped me think about delegating to my leaders in every organization after that, in a way that I probably wouldn't have otherwise. And I think leaders need to say that to themselves and to their subordinate leaders more often. If you're not uncomfortable, you haven't let go of enough.
That's right. I couldn't agree more. That's it.
Yeah, the more we say that to ourselves and to others, the higher the chances it's going to stick. And you're right. If you unpack delegation, it's not just about getting stuff off your plate so you're not so busy, leader, right? It's also not this is the list of crap that I don't like doing, so let me hand it to somebody else so I don't have to do the uncomfortable things. That's not the purpose either, right? It's about multiplying your effectiveness as a leader.
Oh, absolutely. I reflect back on a number of years ago. I was still in the Navy, EOD Mobile Unit Command, the equivalent of battalion command in the Army. And my director of operations came up to me, "Oh, sir, we have to brief you on this and we need your decision." I said, "Okay." So I went into the meeting. It was about 45 minutes long. He's presenting all these options and all these things, and a wonderful presentation, thorough, fantastic. So he's like, so what's the decision? And I said, so why do I have to decide this?
Yeah.
And the room was just silent. Well, because we've always brought it to the commanding officer before. I said, well, is there a law or policy that says I have to decide this? No. Is there a regulation that I'm not aware of that says that I must be the person that signs off on this? No. I said, well, who knows more about this than me? A few hands went up. I said, well, hey, Ops, why don't you come up with a plan of who I'm going to delegate this to and why, and we'll walk through that. And then after we do it once together, I'll just step out and you can be in charge. And again, the room was quiet, and he looked at me like, well, really? I said, yeah, why not? Well, we've never done this before. So why don't you learn? And I think it was kind of it was fun for me, and I learned a lot, because there were a lot of things in this particular process with this particular decision that I didn't know about. So I learned a lot of things. But I think for everybody in the room, for his team and for him, I like to think that it was an empowering moment where they said, oh, okay, we're now enrolled, we're now invested, we now have this new authority that's been delegated to us. Let's make sure we do this with excellence. And I had no doubt they were going to do it anyway, but they never had an opportunity to have that conversation. And of course it went great.
Yeah.
he made the right decision, and it went great.
When I talk to leaders about how they decide things, and you've probably seen within an organization where people are not sure who the decision maker is. Hey, Joe, I thought you were making that decision, or no, I was waiting for you. So you have this gap. Well, if neither one of us feels confident about making that, maybe we need to kick it upstairs and they'll decide. And suddenly you have CEOs of multi-million-dollar companies making $5,000 decisions, and their hourly rate at the C-suite level to make decisions probably suggests that they should not be making these $5,000 decisions, and we should be pushing that down to the lowest level. So I've got 3 rules for decisions, for the context of your decision. It's not about the decision itself, but the first is know exactly whose decision it is. And when in doubt, push it down. That should be done at the lowest possible level. Now, there's ways to assess risk. And if Joe, I give you the decision authority on something and you realize that the risk is greater than what you can underwrite, then you have to kick it back to me. So if I give that to you and you're like, hey, hold on, I'm going to get you in trouble, Bob, if I make this decision poorly. So I need your input. Great. So whose decision is the first one? The second is, what information does the deciding person need to make that? I want you to make good decisions, Joe, but in order for you to make a decision on this, you need to know A, B, and C. The subtask to that is, how is Joe going to get that information? Hey, you folks over in marketing, you people in sales and accounting, you need to be providing this information to Joe so Joe can make a great decision. And oh, by the way, here's the deadlines for getting that information to him because I'm expecting Joe to make a decision by Friday. So first is whose decision is it? Second, what info do they need and how are they going to get it? And then third, when? When is the latest possible? Because there are people who will kick a question down the road far beyond the usefulness of the decision itself. Hey, I've decided we're going to turn left. We missed our exit. Left would have been 3 exits ago. We're already down here. We're crossing the border without you. Right. So knowing that. And I think those 3 guidelines for leaders delegating decision-making authority or planning out when a decision needs to be made, even for themselves. Okay, I've decided I'm the decision maker. This is the pieces of information I need and how I'm going to get that information. And then tell me when I need to make this decision. Oh, well, if you don't have a decision by Friday, we're going to default to yes.
I love that. I love that. And if I may, I'll just underscore a quick
Please do.
Point there. I much like you, I know you've seen this. I've been in some organizations that they had some of what you just talked about in place. And through mentorship and through coaching and through leadership, they were able to elevate that and make it more profound and more effective, right? I've also been in some organizations that, because they hadn't been exposed to that in the past, they were more of the mindset of the previous organization that you described, where they just kicked everything up. And then you got the CEO making the $5,000 decision. And one of the things that I found helpful when I was in an organization like that, and for the leaders out there who may be in an organization like that, I took time to explain. I didn't phrase it the way you phrased it, but I took time to explain to people those elements. Here's the information I need, right time, right place. Here are the kinds of decisions I want to be involved in. And then here are the ones I want to delegate. And here's the timeline for that. And I loved to do things like we talked about earlier, where I didn't necessarily want to make the decision, because in the back of my mind, I knew I wanted to delegate as much as possible, like you said, until you're uncomfortable. Then you know you're getting it right. So I would want to have discussions with people to say, what is this process? What's the decision? When's it due? And then at the end of the process, together as a team, we would say, who's the appropriate authority to delegate that to? Let's delegate that. And then let's implement it, and let's monitor it for a while, make sure it's working right, and then let's roll with it. So I love those kinds of discussions, because it wasn't me making a decision, it was me empowering the team. And so for leaders out there, one way you can do this is to let people know, these are the kinds of decisions I want to be involved in, these are the kinds of conversations I want to have, and when we're done, let's put in place a process of who we're delegating this to and why at the appropriate authority, so the boss isn't making the $5,000.
Yeah, that's a great framework for that.
Hey, it's Bob Dixon here with a quick invite for you. If you're ready to revolutionize your leadership, listen up. You're invited to our new monthly workshop called Total Leader Concept. In just one session, you'll get real battle-tested strategies from my 30-plus years of military and business experience. Imagine unlocking tools that not only help you tackle challenges head-on, but also empower you to inspire and transform your team. This is your chance to break free from the old habits and become the leader you're meant to be. Spots are limited, so act fast. Visit 5eaglesleadership.com/workshop and secure your seat today. And let's redefine your leadership together.
And I think one of the conversations about freeing up the CEO or the C-suite leader, senior leaders decision space is getting those 5,000. I call them bike rack questions, and it actually happened. I can't believe this actually happened to me because I read about the bike rack question in a book, and then I was in a board meeting. And I looked around at the burn rate I had with, it was in a civilian organization in the government, and I had GS-15, so pretty high level, pretty well paid government civilians, and a lot of GS-15s and 14s and 13s in the room. So my burn rate for this meeting was pretty hefty, and somebody actually brought up the location of a bike rack, which again, a $5,000 question. And I'm like, we're going to spend $10,000 discussing this question. It's a $5,000 decision. Can we push this down to a $5,000 decision maker instead of burning all of this brain power and frankly, burning money, making these little decisions? And I think when you frame it like that to senior leaders, say, okay, let's take your salary and let's say you work, I don't know, 2,000 hours a year, 1,750, 2,250, depends. However, whatever you think you're working in a year, let's divide that. Let's figure out what your actual hourly rate is. Include your bonuses, because that's important. And you start to figure out that somebody's making $100, $200, $300, $400 an hour, and you're doing $30 tasks. You're doing $50. How much would you pay to decide the bike rack question? So, I mean, maybe I would pay somebody $30 an hour to make that kind of decision. Okay. So right now I'm paying $1,000 an hour CEO to make a bike rack answer or decision. I'm paying more for the decision than the bike rack is worth. Can we please stop doing that? Can we start powering down to the people at the appropriate level? And by the way, that's how they learn to make good decisions.
You're exactly right. And if I may, you touched upon this in your threefold approach, and you talked about risk.
Yes.
And
risk.
I think there are all kinds of risk. Okay. But the risk I'm thinking about is the risk itself and the perception of risk itself within that decision-making process. And going back to, if somebody feels uncomfortable with something because they haven't done it before, or because they haven't been empowered, or because they're not in an environment where, they can raise their hand and say, why isn't this happening? They may be risk averse, not from the standpoint of the actual risk of the action and the pros and cons and the consequences of action or inaction, but the risk associated with the accountability of making that decision. And so therefore, I'm going to kick it up. And then that culture exists.
That's it.
There's that C word. That culture exists where either people aren't going to be afraid to take some positive action and to do something that's what I call prudent risk, but instead they're going to have this aversion and they're going to say, kick it up. And so again, there are all kinds of risks, but when you said that earlier, it made me think of the risk that's inherent in that process. Now, repeat that 100 times, 1,000 times, embed that in an environment, in an organization, whether it's 2 people or 20,000 people. What do you have now? You have a culture that is averse to making decisions. And the risk inherent in decision making, it's almost counterintuitive to what we were talking about with delegation. And that can absolutely cripple an organization and deprive it of its will to win.
It absolutely does. You're stealing any kind of initiative away from potential decision makers, because look, every decision I make is going to be wrong and you're going to stomp my guts out. So I'm just going to stop making decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right.
Can't have it.
So now if I've got that attitude, I've got no initiative. I may see how to fix a problem, but again, if I stick my neck out to try to fix a problem, I could be wrong and Joe's going to shoot me in the head for that. So I better just kick it up and let Joe be the decision maker for it. Now Joe gets overloaded because you've had to make every little decision because you won't underwrite honest mistakes.
Yep. Well, you're right, and you and I both grew up in the military, and we understand a little thing called commander's intent. And every commander at every level, every leader at every level, they're not going to be there to hold everybody's hand, but the empowerment and the inspiration and the environment that's conducive to winning and the environment that's conducive to success, that is enabled by the leaders who say, okay, here's where we're going. Here's why. Does everybody understand that? Okay, I'm not going to be around every day to hold your hand. You make good decisions. You use the J word. Here it comes. Good judgment. And you do the best you can where you are with the information that you have. And guess what? If your heart's in the right place and you got a great ethical compass and you're doing what's right and you're doing the best you can and you're giving 100% of your personal best effort, guess what? Every once in a while, you're going to make a mistake, and that's okay. And the leader both is empowering the team to take those actions and make those decisions within commander's intent, within understanding the big picture, not because they're there micromanaging everything. And the backside of that is it's okay to make a mistake. Hey, guess what? Your heart was in the right place. You were working hard. You tried. It didn't work out. The leader also has your back. So yes, we're empowered to make decisions and take action when the boss isn't around. And when we make a mistake, even though it was well-intentioned, and we took a little prudent risk and it didn't work out, that's okay. The boss has your back.
Yeah, and I think when you have a culture where you have this zero defect mentality, like, Bob just doesn't make great decisions sometimes, and not every decision he makes is worked out. Instead of unpacking that and seeing, okay, is Bob really, if he's in over his head and he doesn't have the capacity for that particular job, why is he in that job? And so that's okay to say that this is, you've got a right person, but in the wrong seat. So let's move Bob to the seat that he needs to be in, where he gets it, wants it, and has the capacity for it. But if he does have the capacity for it and he just made a mistake, well, then, okay, let's figure out what we can learn from that. And if you have that mentality, you're going to see Bob grow. If you have the mentality that Bob didn't make a best decision, we should take him out back and shoot him. He's not going to be around very long, and he's definitely not going to be taking those prudent risks that move your organization forward. And so that really, it comes down to that culture. Do you have that culture of being able to take prudent risks? And then do you have the trust? Do leaders trust their people to do the right thing? And have we defined what the right thing is? And then do your teammates trust you as a leader that you're going to have my back in spite of making mistakes?
Yep. I'm so glad you said trust, because here's another thing, right? I think you and I could probably have 6 podcasts on the zero defect mentality and why that's horrible. But I will tell you that trust is so key. And whenever I explain it to new leaders and I'm working with a team or I'm consulting with a company, I say you have to create and sustain an environment. And this is a culture thing, but it's a process. You got to create, you got to sustain an environment that is conducive to individual success and team and organizational success. The way you do that, in my experience, is mutual respect and trust. You don't want to have to demonstrate trust. You want to earn it. And it's one of those things that you have, and you don't want to have to, kind of like we were talking about quiet professionalism before. You don't want to have to, constantly, oh, I trust you, it's okay. Oh, I trust you, it's okay. No, earn it, develop it, but you don't have to be flashy about it. Mutual respect, value, and trust. And then it's what you and I were talking about, that people know it's okay to raise my hand and say there's a problem. It's okay to raise my hand and say I need help. It's okay to raise my hand and say I'm not going to get this done in time. Is there anybody else on the team that can give me a hand? It's okay to say I made a mistake, and it's okay to make mistakes that are well-intentioned, where you're given 110%. And then what happens is, over time, through humility and through some of these other factors we talked about, being a good follower, being a good teammate, people realize, oh, I respect everybody on my team and they respect me. And then you get into some hard situations, right? I always say it's not a matter of if there's going to be another crisis or another problem. It's a matter of when, the nature of that crisis, and how long it's going to last. Great teams that have mutual respect and are building and have built trust, they're going to thrive in a crisis or a catastrophe because of these things. They have mutual respect. They know they have each other's back. The leader has their back, and they've developed this trust. And trust isn't blind. Trust is earned, and it is given. And it's, that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a matrix that Simon Sinek uses to talk about trust, and he says you've got performance and you've got trust, and you want the highest performer or the person that you want to trust. And if you use the matrix, obviously you want the high performer that you can trust, but you'd rather take a mediocre performer that you can trust than a high performer that you can't.
That's right.
And that's been borne out so many times in so many organizations where the leader's like, no, I just need this really, really high performer, but they don't work out because they don't fit the culture. Or we look the other way when they start to violate our values because they're such a high performer. And of course, the downside is that every time you look the other way, you erode that culture. You start to give it away, and you start to let it fall to the wayside. And I love value statements. I love it when organizations have them, but only if they're going to live them. Only if they're running their decision-making process through their values. Only if when a senior leader or a junior leader or anybody in the organization steps outside of those values, that they are immediately called on it, then it's a great tool. But when I look back at many organizations that have espoused values, the classic case, of course, is Enron, that like trust, communication, integrity, and teamwork, I think were their 4 core values right before they imploded because of stuff that had nothing to do with integrity, communication, and teamwork. It was a great example of what not to do. And I still see so many organizations espouse these values that drive their culture, but then they have an accidental culture.
Oh yeah, no, you're absolutely right. There is an element of values fit, and there's an element of culture fit, and they may be one and the same, but it's the intangibles. And it's what you talked about earlier. So somebody's has great technical expertise, has experience, has proficiency, but are they a fit for the culture? Do they share common values?
Right.
People always ask me, well, who's the ideal company that you want to work with, or who's your client avatar? And I say, oh, that's easy. I want to work with senior leaders who are presidents, partners, founders, whoever the senior leader is of the organization. I have to know that we have a culture alignment and a value alignment. I have to know that they live their lives the same way they run their business, that there is no difference, right? How you do anything is how you do everything. And I have to want to build a relationship with them that is A, founded upon mutual respect, and B, forges trust. And so I had a colleague, I explained that to several teammates, and I had a colleague say to me, wow, that's a really high bar. People that live their lives the way they run their business, and you can trust them. Wow, that's a really high bar. I said, really? I said, who do you do business with? People who are unethical that you don't trust?
Yeah.
Industry and sector agnostic, size, scope, scale of the company, I'm fine with all of that. If you don't trust people, or you don't want to build a relationship that's founded upon trust with people, why are you working with them?
I always, there's that question of, are there bad employees or just bad leaders? And I think that fits in alongside this. And one great leader I was talking with, he says, well, I'm going to blame the leader. There aren't any bad employees. And I'm like, well, I give him a couple of examples of employees that my leaders within the organization are dealing with. And he says, well, why are they working here? They don't have our values. So if you have a bad employee, I'm looking at the leader and saying, why is that person still here? Now, if they could be developed, if it's a competence issue and they have the ability to learn, great, let's work with them on that. But if they don't share our values, and we may value things like, I don't know, showing up on time, calling when you're going to be late or calling when you're going to be absent, fundamental things that we would expect out of any employee. If they're not living up to those, then they don't fit. And so that's the leadership issue. Isn't that you can't correct them, it's that you keep them.
Absolutely. I refer back to what you said, and I always think about what I refer to as the C3 principle: caring, courtesy, and communication. When you care about people, whether you're a leader, a teammate, 360 degrees, it doesn't matter, follower, doesn't matter. When you care about people and you care about the mission, you will want to communicate with them at all times, and you will do so in a courteous manner. Hey, I'm going to be late for this meeting, right? Hey, whatever it is, right? Most of the interaction, or not interaction, but most of the functional and process problems that I've seen generally fall back to a lack of communication. And the way you fix that is you listen and learn and communicate more. That's what you do.
Absolutely. And I think there's another component that dovetails with communication, and that's transparency.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of leaders struggle with this idea of transparency. Like, how much should we let people know? And I've worked with leaders that are like, oh, we can't let the troops know about this. Boy, we better not tell them that we lost this big client, or we better not tell them that we didn't get that sale, or we better not tell them. And I always wonder, so what is going to happen if you do? And they're going to freak out and they're going to start looking, dusting off their resumes and looking for another job. I'm like, well, then you don't have the right culture. You haven't built trust. You haven't got the people's buy-in into your bigger vision, because you're going to lose clients. You're going to miss sales. But if they trust that you're going to move the organization forward, then those are just incidents along the way. Those are just part of the journey.
Yep. 100%.
The transparency thing comes up a lot. I'm in the M&A space with one of my companies, and I've got interaction with a lot of sellers. These are people who are going to try to sell their business, and they don't want anybody to know about it. And I said, well, who in your company knows? Well, nobody. I'm like, but there's people you are related to in your company. Yeah, but they don't know. Like, wait, what? You haven't told your brother that you're selling the company. You haven't told your son or daughter that's in the company. You haven't told them. No, they'll freak out. I'm like, well, okay, so we've got a huge trust deficit. And I'm like, I'm not sure that I want that company in my portfolio when you can't trust your own people enough to tell them that we're preparing for a change in ownership.
Yeah. Well, I had a former teammate, that whenever we talked about transparency, he was his ethos, he called it operate in the light. Do things so that everything that's happening, everybody can see. Now, that doesn't mean that you share everything with everyone at every moment. There are certain things that are, right, confidential information, whatever the case may be, but operate in the light, for everybody to see, individually, as a team, organizationally, and things come back around. Do what's right, tell the truth, the things we learned when we were kids. Be the person you're supposed to be the leader you're supposed to be the leader that your team needs you to be. I'll wrap this part by saying that, everybody in an organization, whether it's a team of 2 or a team of 20,000, every individual is there to be the best at what they were brought in to do. So there's nobody else there to be the best CEO other than the CEO. There's nobody else there to do logistics other than the best logistics person. So be the best at what you're supposed to be the best at, and learn from the people who are better than you.
That is a great exclamation point for our conversation, Joe. And I think I often, at the end of a podcast, I like to list some of the major lessons that I'm walking away from. And it's difficult because we covered so much, from everything from decision making and strategy, delegation, and risk taking, and trust and culture. I think what we have here is somewhat of a recipe for what are the guiding principles and the skill set that a great leader, an exceptional, an elite leader, as you put it in your terms at Alakai Leadership, is that it's about being the very best leader that you can be. And all of those are ingredients, and they're going to be mixed together in every leader in their particular way. I don't know, Joe, you might be baked at 325 and I'm baked at 350. I don't know if you put the eggs in first and you put the delegation in second, but the recipe's going to be a little bit different based on our backgrounds and our cultures. But at the end of the day, all of those ingredients are necessary. And
they are indeed.
There are a handful of others, but the essence of the leadership is making sure that it's not about you, leader. It's got to be about your troops, and it's got to be about your mission.
Yeah, Bob, I couldn't agree more. And I will underscore that by saying, just paraphrasing a little what you said, but this is a belief that I've had for many years. Leadership is never about the leader. It's about those whom we serve. And that goes back to the quiet professionalism, the humility, all those kinds of things. But once an individual gets that, then you have an opportunity to become a great leader, an elite leader. And it is never a position. It's never a rank. It's never a title. It certainly isn't an office or a salary. It's about caring for other people and caring for the mission. And as I mentioned earlier, developing others to become better than the best we ever knew.
Love it.
That's it. We do that. We're going to set some teams up for success.
Absolutely. And Joe, you have helped a lot of leaders in uniform and out of uniform. And I love what you do now with helping companies be their very best, helping leaders within companies be their very best. And it doesn't really matter what industry you're in. Leadership is leadership and people are people. And I've heard it 100 times from small business owners, but we're unique. I'm like, yes, you're unique, just like everybody else. But the fundamentals still apply. It's like gravity and oxygen, right? These are things that are not optional. And the deliberate approach to leadership, not optional, leader, if you want to see your company thrive. So 100%. If you do out there, get a hold of Joe. You can find him at Alakai Leadership, and the link will be in the show notes, but you can also find him at 5eaglesleadership.com. He is an affiliate coach with 5 Eagles, and his methodology for helping leaders be their very best is proven over and over. Joe, thanks so much for being here. I have truly, truly enjoyed this conversation.
Bob, thank you so much, my friend. I appreciate it. Again, an honor and a privilege. I love learning from you, and I love serving with you. And so keep up the great work, and keep leading with inspiration and heart, my friend.
Thank you, brother. We'll see you soon.
Take care. Thank you.